March 2023 will mark 3 years since health experts declared that COVID-19 was a pandemic. Now, high case numbers of both flu and RSV are back in the mix, creating what people are calling a tripledemic. Because misinformation can spread so quickly on social media, we sat down with an expert to debunk some common misconceptions about this tripledemic. Dr. Jessica Brinkworth is an immunologist at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and shares tips on how to keep you and your loved ones protected against serious illness.
My name is Jessica Brinkworth. I am an assistant professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and I'm an evolutionary immunologist in the anthropology department. We could talk a little bit about the respiratory infectious disease tripledemic and what's coming up this spring. So the tripledemic is shorthand for a series of very serious infections that are happening worldwide right now and have a particularly big impact on the US. They are influenza, COVID-19, and respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, and there are not just coinciding because their seasons for flu and RSV tend to follow one another, and COVID has no season, but they are peaking in big numbers of hospitalizations, and it's putting a really big strain on the hospital system in the US. But what's interesting about this year, this season of 2022 to 2023, is that the numbers are super high, and they're super high and are peaking at unexpected times in the season. In 2018 for flu, those numbers were 5 to 9 in 100,000. This year, on the same week, it's 44.3. RSV was similar, very low those years. This year, it's a full order of magnitude higher. So this is really big. In total, the overall burden for this year right now for flu, and the flu season won't end until about March, is somewhere between 13,000 to 39,000 people have already died in the US from flu alone. The grander question is probably, why is this peak happening? And the answer is it's actually really complex. It's really important to note, first and foremost, that RSV has been on the rise for years. RSV is a disease that if you have children, you're probably familiar with because it commonly comes home from daycares. Most kids have been exposed before age 2. One of the things that makes RSV really sticky is that the incubation period between when you get the infection and when you start to present symptoms is about 4 days long. That is a lot of time. That is almost an entire daycare week. And you can be reinfected over and over again. So this is something that makes it really difficult to get a handle on. There's experimental evidence and clinical evidence in mice and in humans that individuals infected with a strain 2 months later can be reinfected and symptomatic with the same strain. It doesn't seem to trigger a whole lot of B-cell responses that lead to the development of memory. And so this presents a really interesting challenge for handling RSV. It's presented a huge challenge for the development of vaccines. One of the things that I think has been missed in the story of RSV this year is that also it is an important pathogen for at-risk adults. So that includes frail and elderly people who are immunocompromised. About 78% of the deaths that occur each year are among people 65 years and older. So what's interesting is that it's been said to cause this really big disease burden that's at least as comparable to diseases like influenza. What should be noted is that people who are age 65, RSV is so prevalent, they are likely to have had hundreds of exposures over the course of their entire lifetime, and yet they have really low neutralizing antibody titers. And so this notion that being protective, say wearing a mask or having gone through a shutdown, might lead to an uptick in RSV infections doesn't hold very well. So immunity debt is a highly jargonized term for the notion of infection rebound, which is another highly jargonized term. But basically what it means is that if you have an organism that has been isolated from exposure to a number of pathogens, when that organism then is no longer isolated, they have no standing adaptive immunity to it, and so they will get very, very sick, and they will get sick potentially by multiple things at once. There's a bunch of reasons to not apply immunity debt to this particular situation. The first one being that RSV doesn't trigger any long-standing immunity of any kind, like even lasting a couple of weeks. At least adaptive immunity or immune memory. And so for that reason alone, because the concept of immunity debt relies on this notion of immune memory, it doesn't apply. The second reason why it's not necessarily something that you would apply here is that it forgets about things like vaccines, that there's a long, nice body of work that demonstrates that the more influenza vaccines you have over the course of your lifetime for whatever strains are available, the more likely you are to be able to fend off an incoming influenza. And influenza immunity generally lasts quite a long time. Sometimes it's short and we don't know why, but generally speaking, it's for years and years. So it doesn't work super well in this situation, I think, but it's a catchy term. And it's very easy to say, and people get the notion of debt. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's caught on the way that it has. The nickname for this strain, which is XBB 1.5, is the Kraken. One of the reasons why it's a Kraken is because it's a recombinant of a couple different BA2 variants. So it's the outcome of genetic recombination of at least two viruses in one host at one time. So recombination is something that a lot of positive stranded RNA viruses, just like SARS-CoV-2, do. This strain was predicted. So this is really cool. About a year ago, the Bloom lab sat down and looked at the sequences in the available strains at that time and said, here are the amino acids that I would change in these protein sequences, given what I know the function is, if I wanted to be unbeatable. And they ran a bunch of fancy algorithms to do this. And one of the highlighted changes was this specific change. XBB.1.5 is likely to continue to surge. We're seeing a surge right now. It's probably due to human behavior, but this is the dominant strain and it seems to be more transmissible. So we'll have to wait and see if it is. I expect that we're going to have a bump over the next 2 months anyway, stemming from the winter break, because people get together and they get together unmasked. And we have fewer protections that are enacted right now, right? Like just routinely. So whether or not that happens really depends on human behavior. So my strongest suggestion is always is to mask, and limit your indoor close breathing time, I guess, with large groups of people. That's the best possible advice I can offer.